Greetings, people of the internet. I'm sad to say GrowWatt doesn't live here anymore. That's right, I've had to say goodbye to GrowWatt for now. It was as you know, my previous video about my solar, I was not happy about what happened with my GrowWatt. In the time that I needed it to work, it failed. And for what reason, I still don't know. Other than the only thing I can figure is I overloaded it. But it is a 3,000 watt inverter, and I don't think that's what I did. I think there's a firmware problem with that, and I reached out to GrowWatt back when it happened, and indeed there is a firmware update, but when I tried to apply it, I had nothing but trouble. So I've got to get back with GrowWatt and see what's going on with that. But in the meantime, I have got to move forward with my solar system. And I watch Andy at Off Grid Garage. He's a German expat who lives in Australia. And this guy tests everything from batteries to BMS systems to solar panels to telling you what size fuse. The guy is just a wealth of information. He's always experimenting. So rather than reinvent the wheel, I learned from him, and he's got all Victron gear. With the exception of a few batteries and things like that. But for everything else, even though he's built his own battery shelf unit, he uses some of the Victron gear I'm going to go over today. And look, not only did Victron get the king of cheap to spend money on their equipment, but I also paid pretty damn close to retail. Because you can't find people who can wholesale this stuff because you got to be an authorized distributor. So, yeah, I'm paying the Apple price for Victron products, but I think you'll see here in a minute that they're worth every penny. So, let me show you what it is that I'm now running my solar on, and then we'll come back and we'll talk some more about it. All right, so there have been some big changes to my solar, and you know, I've started and stopped this video 3 or 4 times, but I'm gonna start it again today, and by God, I'm gonna get through it if it's the last thing I do. So the big changes are to to the whole setup. I'm still running a 24 volt system. However, I've managed to get a deal on another 24 volt battery for under $600. So I grabbed one up. So that brings my total of 24 volt batteries to 4. So you take 4 of those at 100 amp hours and you put them in parallel. You get 24, 25, 26 volts out of them. And you get 400 amp hours. The ones on the top have been reorganized. You know, I made my own battery. And it contains, each battery pack is 8 cells, so there are 8 cells in the front, 8 in the back. The front 8 are controlled by this JK BMS, and the 8 in the back are controlled by a Dolly BMS. And then I have a spare JK. I love these BMSs because they also are active balancers for the battery. And they come in really handy. The dollies are okay, but they're kind of limited in what they can do. They don't keep your cells balanced as well as the JK BMS does. And don't take my word for it. Off Grid Garage has got a whole series of videos on BMSs that he did. So I've just wired all 4 of these battery banks into parallel. And the positive cable comes out of the positive lead on one battery pack. And then I go as far as I can down the chain with the negative cable, and that goes to the negative side of that battery down there. So all of that comes into a 100 amp fuse. And off of this 100 amp, off of this the powered side of the battery, I have a fuse. And that goes up, and that powers this is the Victron shunt, and I'll talk to you more about the Victron gear I'm using, but this is where it gets its power from. This is on the battery live at all the time. And then I have a shut-off switch here that feeds up into my Victron Lynx power in. This is basically a bus bar. It's rated at 1,000 amp. It's not cheap. It was about 150 or 160 bucks. And I did have to put studs in this and my own fuses, but we'll get to that in a minute. Back to the fuse. I've already had the fuse blow because this system is so powerful. It put, and I forgot to change one of the settings on the Victron, and it was putting so many amps back into the battery that it blew the fuse and protected the cable and the battery and whatnot. So I've decided to go a different route. Rather than using that fuse, I got a DC rated circuit breaker right here, and it's 100 amp, and it is DC rated for up to 250 volts. And it has remember, DC breakers are different than AC breakers. This will only go on the positive side. So I use number 4 cable for my batteries, so this should handle them. I handle that cable just fine. And then I got an enclosure to put it in. Right here is a single gang enclosure. It's big, but you know, it is what it is. Now, one of the things I did was I put in a power outlet to power all the things. Okay, I'm not real happy with how that turned. I mean, it turned out fine. And I've got this is the plug going to my rack. This is the plug going to my PC. This is the plug coming to my little Sensei, and this is a plug going to another project I'm working on right here. But I decided I'd rather have these outlets. These have USB, the original USB plugs, and it has USB-C. So I can plug in, and it has the protected shuttered outlet. So I'll be able to plug stuff in here and still plug in and get USB power if I need to. And then this plug is rated at 15 amp, or is it a 20 amp? This might be a 20 amp plug. I'll have to look because it has a little chingadera over here. So that's even better. So, but it has all the electronics built into it, and it's, pardon me, you see how big they are on the back side. It'll just fit into this box with the wiring, so I've decided to go that route. Now, the main event, well, let me take you over to this side first. This is my standby emergency power side. This is a automatic transfer switch, and this is a standalone 3,000 watt, 24 volt Onswi power that you've seen me use before. And this is my backup unit in case something happens to this monster right here. I love Victron products. This is the Victron Multi Plus 2 24 volt 3000 VA 70 amp charger. So it also has an AC transfer capacity of 50 amps. Now right now I've got this thing on a 15 amp circuit. That's what this cord here is. This is the AC power in, and it goes down to a 15 amp outlet. And that's all this will handle. So I'm going to have to run a sub panel in here, and it's going to be at 50 amps. I'm going to give this Multi Plus 50 amps to be able to pass through it, so it can transfer that 50 amps out into this plug here. Now, the plug I'm using will only be a 20 amp plug, but the output will then come, instead of coming from here, it will go into another breaker panel that'll have a row of 20 amp and 15 amp breakers. So that'll be my critical loads panel is what they call it. But I got a hell of a deal on this. I got it for $1,000. I got it online. I got it from an authorized seller, because you have to be licensed or you have to be okayed by Victron to sell these, because they provide the support. I've needed zero support, even though this got a little bit damaged in transfer. It got a little boo-boo on one of its corners up here. I forget which one. But the thing works like a charm. I mean, it just, I've had it in here over a month now, and let me tell you, it works great. It just really, I cannot say enough good things about Victron equipment. They're expensive, but they're not really expensive when you think of what you get. Just this inverter, and it's not a battery charger, it's just an inverter, was $400 for a 3,000 watt 24 volt good quality inverter. This one is an inverter with a charge controller and a transfer switch, and you name it, it'll do it. It has everything but a solar charge controller. We'll get to those in a minute. For $1,000, and this is a 24 volt version. Now, I've gotten a lot of people have asked me, why didn't I go with a 48 volt? Well, because the 48 volt takes double the amount of cells. So instead of having 8 cells in a pack, I would have 16. That really increases the price of it. But the beauty is that I can put these packs not only in parallel but in series. So if I want to later convert this pack up here to a 48 volt battery, I just have to put the right cables on. Same way with these two Redodo batteries down here. I've given up on building my own batteries for a brief period of time while the prices kind of stabilize on battery. And then to handle the solar panels, I have 4 400 watt solar panels that you saw the video on, hopefully, that I purchased here locally and got a really good deal on. They're controlled by this smart solar charge controller. This is the MPPT 15035. So it'll handle up to 150 volts, which is good because you want to wire your panels in series. You want to up the voltage on them because you use smaller wire with a higher voltage, and they'll handle up to 35 amps. In other words, it'll put 35 amps into these battery connections right here. So I've got my solar coming in from here. It comes up through a breaker, a series of breakers right there by the window, and I can turn that on and off. And then the cables come down here to the Victron bus bar. I may take this cover off and let you see inside. It's basically just fuses and the positive and negative bus bar. And I can link these together with other Victron devices. So that handles this charge controller handles my 400 watt panels, the 4 of them. So 1600 watts it can handle. This is the Victron, their little communication cable. And that's the other thing about the Victron. These are all smart devices, so they all talk to one another and coordinate the charging and the power coming in and all that stuff. And I'll explain to you here shortly how I have it configured, because it was a long and hard road to get to where I am. This charge controller is hooked up to my 100 watt panels. I have, let's see, 4, 5, 6. I think I have 1,000 watts. I think I have 1,000 watt panels. They're not all connected right now because we're getting ready to move the panels to a different location, but I have about 600 watts of panels hooked up here and about 1,600 watts of panels connected here. So they provide me with plenty of energy. And again, these all go down through the Victron shunt where they have a fuse protection. I've only got a 40 amp fuse in here for these because the most they'll put out is 35 amps. So, and the cable I'm using is sized properly. And again, another control cable. And then this is the solar PV cable that comes down to the breakers. Okay. We have a long black cable coming out of the Victron Multi Plus 2. This is the inverter and the charge controller and all that stuff that controls switching between the battery and the mains, as they call them. I've talked about that endlessly. And I'm sorry about this big loop of cable, but this is a cable going to... There are several ways to program a Victron Multi Plus 2. And once you get it initially set up, you really don't need this black cable anymore, but I leave it in there because it goes to a little device here on my computer. Let's see here, where is it? That converts, yeah, here it is. That converts that signal to USB, and that came with, this device came with the Victron Multi Plus 2. It's a VE bus to USB adapter, and that's so I can do some more intense programming of that Victron Multi Plus 2. And then the brains, well, I had a couple of choices. I could have gone with a a Raspberry Pi, which is what I was running my old system on, or I decided to go ahead and bite the bullet and get the Serbo SGX. And basically, this is the command and control center that gives you all the pretty graphics and puts you onto the internet and talks to all of the other Victron devices with, a simple communication cable. So this device is not, these things here, they run about 300 a piece, 250, 300 a piece, and this thing runs about 300. Unless you know where to buy them. You get a really good deal. And I got a really good deal. But this saves me the trouble of having to put a Raspberry Pi on there and then have to deal. This has every interface that Victron makes on it. So for me, it was a no-brainer, because after I figured out the cost of making all these little cables of my own to try and save money, it ended up being like maybe 25 bucks cheaper than a Serbo. So why not just go with the Serbo GX? And I got the Serbo S GX because I'm not interested in having this talk to the batteries or control the batteries. So that was the model I opted for. So we'll go back to the computer here in a minute. I'll sit down and explain to you how I've got this thing programmed, but it is on the wall. The next thing I need to do is run a 50 amp cable from my main panel to a sub panel here that's capable of carrying 50 amps. Tie that into here, and then another sub panel for my critical loads. It's not going to be here. It's going to be in the server room when all is said and done. I've just got some major reorganization to do. And then I have shut-off switches so I can isolate the batteries from the bus bar. I can also isolate the bus bar from the Victron here. And then this is just simply a resistor so that I can pre-charge it's a momentary contact button, and it's tied into the leads of this switch so that I can. There are large capacitors in this Victron Multiplus, so when you go to power it up, you don't just want to turn the battery on. You could, in theory, they say you could damage the unit. Victron doesn't have anything on it, but people seem to say put that ballast resistor in there so it can slowly charge up the capacitors on this Victron Multiplus, which is what I've done, and I do it with this inverter. Any other inverter system I used it with the Grow Watt. And then this is the Victron Smart Shunt, and this measures all of the energy coming in and out of the batteries. So it helps you determine what state of charge your battery bank is at, so that you know if you're getting too low. It'll then trigger this thing to put it on the grid and whatnot. And then of course I don't have the communication set up with any of the BMSs. I just control them over my phone. But yeah, there it is. It's all set up, and it's been running now for well over a month, and I've been very happy with it. I had one incident where, stupid me, when I went to initially hook this up, I left these cables loose for the battery connection because I didn't know exactly. You see the bend I have in this wire for this switch. I didn't know exactly where it was going to go. And then a few weeks ago, I was sitting at my desk, and I kept hearing this bzz, 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 bzz. And the lights were flickering, and the UPSs were going off, and all kinds of weird shit. And I came over here, and I finally isolated it to that positive connection. I had not tightened down that bolt properly. So double check your work. And it ran for days just fine, giving me no indication. I thought that finally that damage to the inverter had caught up with me and it was going out, but it was just a simple stupid mistake that I had forgotten to tighten down that cable. So there you go. There's the setup. Yeah, so there you go. That's all the gear I'm currently running, and it's I'm going to explain to you how I have it set up right now, and then I'm going to show you the Victron energy screen that you get using the Serbo and that kind of stuff. And the Serbo, by the way, has its own screen that you can mount on the wall and do touch screen if you want to. Or you can just run the application on a tablet, hang that on the wall, do something like that. But batteries, let's talk about batteries, because a lot of people are like, Joe, why are you spending all this money on 24-volt batteries when you're going to eventually go to a 48-volt system? And that is true. This is the last 24-volt inverter I'm buying because bang for the buck for the battery size, you can get better capacity with the higher amp hour cells. You follow me? And it costs less per kilowatt hour to store that. So I am going to go to 48-volt batteries. But I haven't wasted my money on these 24-volt batteries because I'll just put them in series, put two of them in series. I'll have a 48-volt 100 amp hour battery. That's 4.8 kilowatts. So that'll be good. And then I can just build my own 48-volt batteries moving forward, which is what the long-term plan is. Now, one of the things about the Victron system that I was really concerned about was the learning curve, what it was going to take me, this old brain, to figure out how it works. And I'm proud to say this old brain figured it out pretty quick. The instructions are as clear as muddy water, and there aren't a lot of videos out there on Victron gear on how to program it. But there are articles out there. The few that are out there are very well written and pretty concise. I use a function on that system called ESS, Shared Storage, or Shared Storage, something like that. And it's basically a programming language. It's like having an AI. You give it some commands. You give this AI, hey, if this thing meets this criteria, do this other thing, and present it to me. So that's how the Victron system works. So it's basically a simple programming language that even an old fool like me can figure out how to do and how to use. Even, in a lot of countries outside the U.S., well, even in the U.S., they have peak times when the electricity is really, really cheap. And that's a time you might want to have the batteries get charged if they're down below, their 80% or 100% state of charge. You might want to charge them up when that energy is cheaper. If the next day you're going to have a bad solar day, it gives you that option. But that's the whole point. You can program it for all kinds of things. With the servo, you've got all these sensors you can plug into it, so it can know the time and the temperature and the humidity and all this other stuff that it needs to know, and it takes that into account when it's programming the inverter to do its thing. So the way I've done the inverter before was, when the solar is out, I have it run my rack off of solar and battery. So any excess solar goes into my rack, but it charges the batteries first. You follow me? Suffice it to say, depending on how much current is coming in, how much wattage is coming in, determines where the majority of that power goes. And I was able to do that with a grow watt. But the one thing I wanted to do with a grow watt was use my batteries as just like a UPS. And when the solar was out, I wanted the Victron to invert that to AC power I could use in my rack. So as long as the sun is up and shining, I want it to power my rack. And then as the sun level goes down, the wattage goes down. The inverter then will kick in with AC power when needed, right? So it's an intelligent device. And then, so now I'm able to tell the Victron, just look, keep the batteries fully charged, because they're really there for an emergency, right? That's the thing about these LiFePO4 cells, lithium iron phosphate. And are they safe enough to have in your house? Look, I'm an idiot. Do what I do at your own peril. No, probably not a great idea. Why they won't typically have the runaway effect, because they don't generate their own oxygen with lithium. Ion does, generates oxygen, which makes the fire burn hotter. That's why they're not allowed on airplanes. But these, LiFePO4, I still wouldn't have them in my house. If I had a choice, I'd have them in an outhouse or an outbuilding, or maybe in a room that's covered with some fireproof material, that kind of thing, an event, just in case, your family comes first. But I'm an idiot, and, there's just the two of us and the dog. But anyway, my point is, I'll later be able to combine these batteries into a 48 volt. So the Victron inverter I currently have is a 3000 VA inverter, which means I can get about 2400 watts out of it, which translates, let's put it this way. It can also pass through 50 amps of current just on the transfer switch, and it can charge the battery with 70 amps of current. So it's a big boy. So I'm actually going to put a sub panel in this room with a 50 amp feeder circuit from my main panel, and I'm going to wire this up to a 50 amp breaker, and then I'll have branch circuits. I'll have my my critical loads panel, so to speak, on separate circuits, and then I'll be able to easily transfer between grid power and the Victron system if I need to. But I just put the Victron system in UPS mode basically, and the batteries only come online to be charged if they get below a certain level. The Victron maintains all that, all through its servo and its programming language, and all that other stuff. It's just so well written that I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. And then there's the wealth of information that the servo collects. Now, a lot of people are opposed, and I'm one of them, of having your data out on the cloud, but you don't have a choice with Victron. When you hook up to their system, it gives you actually a web address you can share with other people. And I've put that link in other videos. I'll try to remember to put it down in the notes on this video. But if you want to see what my solar factory is producing at any time, you can log on to this website as a viewer, and you can see what it's producing. And as you can see, my batteries are fully charged. I'm getting 566 watts from solar, 29 watts from the grid, and then I've got AC loads of 556 watts. But you can't really believe that. While this interface does its best to keep up, you're better to go over to the remote console. This is what you would see on the touch screen if you had that for the Servo GX. So that basically tells you 28 watts coming from the grid, 541 watts going to power the grid, and 580 watts coming in from the solar. And then if I want to program this thing, I can do it from here. I can run this app on my cell phone. I can run it on my tablet. I could run it on a touchscreen interface that's compatible with the Servo GX. And so I'm not going to go over all these settings, but I was talking to you about the ESS, and I also have DVCC set up. I had to set that up to limit the amount of charge current that goes into the battery to 50 amps. I had this set up, I think to 70 or 80 amps. 70 amps to the maximum. And it blew the fuse. So, because keep in mind, it's also, this inverter has to power other things while it's charging your battery. So I lowered that down to 50 amps, and that is an okay current to charge at, according to the manufacturer. But then there's this ESS setting, and these are the modes. So right now I have it set to keep batteries charged, but you see I have options here. I can do it, optimize the battery life, optimize without battery life, etc. And then any other scripts you create will then show up in here as a mode. I believe that's how it works. And then you can apply it. So if you can program it, you can apply it, and it'll follow whatever rules you give it. There are also some add-ons to this program that you can get if you kind of side load the Victron software. There's a open source piece of software that provides more information on these little panes here that you see. I haven't attempted to do it because I'm a little leery of it, but your mileage might vary. So there you go. A substantial investment in new equipment. And keep in mind, I didn't buy all this at one time. I bought it over this last year. Stuff's not cheap, and especially with inflation. And right now, I'm not spending any more money on solar. Not yet. I need more capacity. I need more storage capacity. I need more solar capacity. But until I get my solar panels put in their permanent location and secured, and making sure that they don't overshadow one another or cast shadows on one another. I want to make sure I'm getting the optimum output from my solar panels. And then that'll help me determine how much storage space I need and how I want to use my storage space. A lot of people will run their rack off the storage off their batteries. Sorry, jeez, off their batteries and solar simultaneously. I did that for a long time with the Grow Watt because, frankly, that was the only option I could figure out how to make to work. But on the Victron, I have options. I like that. And that's another reason I'm staying at 24 volts right now. I don't have a lot of demand in my studio. All told, I would probably have less than 2100 watts of demand running the air conditioning, the ceiling fan, computers, my daily computers that run on the rack over here. I don't think that would be an issue. It could power this whole studio with about 2100 watts or 2.1 kilowatt hours or 2.1 kilowatts of power. So there's no need right now for me to jump to a 48 volt system because I'm not going to go past that 3000 watt magic mark, I call it. If you're going to produce more, if you need more than 3000 watts of power, then you need to go to the 48 volt big boys from Victron. And they're not that much more expensive. They're a couple $100 more than the 24 volt unit. And if you get them on sale, I believe they're the same price as this entry level. This is not the entry level. It's like the second level of the 24 volt series. And it's worth, frankly, I know, well, it's going to shock a lot of people to hear this. It's worth every penny I paid. Every penny I have paid because it's increased my production. Just changing out the MPPT charge controllers increased my output by nearly 20%. So I don't know what was going on with the Grow Watt. Again, hate to throw Grow Watt under the bus. They served me well for the time I was using them, and I've still got it back here. I'm going to hook it. I'm going to get another 24 volt battery, and I'm going to get some panels just for the Grow Watt to run the pool pump next year. So it's going to be put back to life, but it's going to be in a non-mission critical position. You know what I'm saying? I need to depend on this power to be there and not have the inverter go berserk when I have an emergency. Say I need heat, I need to cook something. Although my grill has that covered. So there you go. As you know, I could go on all day about solar power, and I just love playing with this stuff. And I'm learning as I go. I'm learning a lot as I go, and how expensive it is, because this is why I try to show you when I started this solar journey. I laid out all the stuff in front of me that I had to have before I could even put all this stuff in place. And then you can make mistakes. You get the wrong bit of information or think you know what you're doing. Thank God for Amazon returns, or I'd be broke. And you buy the wrong stuff on impulse or whatever reason. So it's like with any other new hobby you get into. And right now I call it a hobby, but it's actually paying its way because we can see the overall usage of power going down on a monthly basis. I mean, it's actually making an impact on our power use. So is it worth it to you? You have to determine that. But for me, it's doing well. Anyway, we hope you found this video entertaining and informative as always. Please give us a thumbs up down below if you liked the video. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and click that notification bell to be notified of new videos when they come out. Donate if you're so inclined. If you're so inclined. PayPal, Patreon, YouTube join function, or YouTube Premium. And come on board the train and get screwed just like the rest of us. Good to see y'all. Thanks for coming again to see this old guy ramble on about solar. And don't forget, we'll see all of you on the other side.